Hi, this is Jeff with the INTJ equation, and today I'm joined by Jan. He's an INTJ with traits of avoidant personality disorder, something that I discussed and something that's affected me personally. But before we get started, I would like to remind you to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment below. You can add me on Discord. I have a Discord server. All the links will be down below in the description, and add me on social media, INTJ equation all around. Jan, would you like to tell the people a little bit about yourself and where you're from and your background?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jan. I live in Germany and I'm an engineer. And yeah, I am quite introverted.
Okay. So you said that you believe you're an INTJ as well, right? You've tested as that before on test, or
I did some online tests. You could probably say they could be kind of bogus, but I probably mostly identify with the description of an INTJ. And the people who are also INTJs, I kind of like them. So I suppose that that's enough for diagnosis.
yeah, I think the tests are, I mean, they're kind of hit or miss. It doesn't have a high accuracy rate, and a lot of people will get mistyped. And I've seen a lot of people get mistyped and they think that they're that type and they try to live as that type, but it's kind of totally the wrong description, the wrong advice that they get, and causes a lot of turmoil. Or like younger kids especially, they're harder to type because they're still developing and they think that they're one type one week and next time, and just cause a lot of mental anguish for a lot of people.
I think there is a lot of criticism, and it's a fair criticism, I suppose. But there is also, I think it's a good framework, and you can use it to further your understanding of your personality. But you cannot take it too religiously, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the MBTI and stuff gives the psychology a bad name. I think it goes a lot more in depth, and that's what my channel is kind of about. Or when I'm trying to create my channel around, there's just a lot of content to go over. I mean, there's like Socionics, there's John Beebe. There's a lot of different models that you can go of that go more in depth than MBTI, which is very vague and not very descriptive. It's kind of like you take a test. I think tests in general, even in school, they just kind of teach you how to remember things, then you kind of forget it. They don't really test you on knowledge and what you know. And a lot of people don't know themselves, or they'll read the description like, oh, I really like this type, so I'm going to answer how this type would answer, sort of thing. I think it's really learning, doing the hard work. It's, because, I'm sure like being an engineer, it took a lot of time and a lot of practice and a lot of skill. And you just kind of can't wing that. You got to make sure the car parts. You said you're an engineer for like a auto industry, right?
Yeah, mechanical engineer.
Yeah, so you can't really half-ass that basically, because the parts will malfunction and people get hurt.
Yeah, it's interesting how I kind of choose to do this career, or maybe it's not interesting. It's kind of obvious to me, but it's just how it doesn't really matter if you can talk to people that well, or if you don't have to convince people that much, at least in the beginning, unless you're doing like sales.
Hmm.
And what matters is your like the analytical understanding of things, and how if you can really see into the inner workings of things, which is a lot like the what is it, the internal um, the sorry, the one of the aspects of INTJ that I read about. I think it's the internal sensing. No, the
Uh,
internal, uh,
Introverted sensing.
yeah, or introverted intuition. No, sensing it is. I think it's sensing.
Well,
That's the one. Because
INTJs are led by NI, which is introverted intuition. The introverted intuition kind of, and introverted sensation. They're similar in a lot of ways, and they're different in a lot of ways. I just released my SI video, the introverted sensing, right now, so you guys could check that out. I think the difference between the two is with introverted intuition, which INTJs and INFJs lead with, it kind of intakes information and kind of looks at it in an abstract manner, where the sensation functions look at things that are concrete, and it kind of gives like a futuristic look to it. Like you can like okay, this is what I'm learning, this is what I'm picking up, this is what I'm taking in with my senses for the future. Or like a SI user would do it, like they think about their past for the present and they're not too concerned about the future, really. Kind of like I was telling you about the SJs and like how in Germany the country shut down on Sundays
Yeah.
because that's
Yeah,
like a,
now I get it. Yeah, now I will picking up on the SC and SI. Those are different things. I think what I meant to say was the TI and TE. The difference between TI and TE
mm-hmm,
is like the TI will take things apart and look what's inside, while the
yeah,
TE will try to see what's all the possibilities you could do with it.
yeah,
And
yeah, it
that
kind of puts things in action.
exactly, like I read this description that one person, like the TE will look at like small piece of something like an atom of the universe, and he will think about what could all be made out of, what all the possibilities are in the universe. And the TI will look at the universe and describe it all the way down to the atom.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Exactly. And to me, that the second one just resonates so much more than the first one, because the first one is like, to me, well, all these possibilities in my head could just be a bunch of bullshit. But taking the universe apart and looking all the way down to its fabric is like basically like doing science. So maybe that's why more makes more sense to me.
Yeah, and I think Western culture really kind of frowns upon things like intuition. Even Jung, Carl Jung, guy who like coined all these terms, almost didn't include it because it's such a strange thing. It's just incorporeal, it's not real. And, everyone's about hard facts, science, and data, but they're not really about the mysticism or the esoteric or what could be the kind of the possibilities. They kind of just want what science can detect and what can determine, really.
Yeah, it's true.
So engineering is a pretty popular field for INTJs. What kind of got you interested in that?
Well, my father was also an engineer, so it kind of pushes you when you're young. You don't really know what you want to do, so you're at school, you're thinking, what should I do next? So you're thinking, well, your parents might be pushing you that way. But in my case, it wasn't always like this. It was kind of like a rational decision, or like a reasonable decision that I finally came to at like 20 years of age. Before that, I was kind of on like a really random, um, let's say like a developing phase. And I was pretty much against the direction my parents would push me into. I wanted to be like something more like a philosopher or something,
Mm-hmm.
which would be something like INTP would want to do. And I also like the INTP type, and I think I identify with it to an extent as well. So I like to put it like in a vacuum. I like to be an INTP, but in a real world where things matter, I am an INTJ, because I gotta make a living, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense.
Yeah, I think
So
like, I'll go ahead, finish.
no, I don't really have much to say. You go ahead.
I was gonna kind of piggyback off that. I think like going back like to the intrinsic and the unknown is kind of shunned upon here. It's kind of like philosophy. I think it's a very important part of our society, and there definitely has been some suspected INTJ philosophers like Frederick Nietzsche. A lot of people think he's an INTJ. I know I talked to one guy who thinks he's an INFJ, but I think it's really hard to determine a historical figure, especially when I know he's German. So I don't really speak German fluently, so I couldn't really look at the original text and kind of decipher that. There's like Ayn Rand and there's a few others. But yeah, I could see what you're getting from. You kind of got to pay the bills and kind of got to go with the flow.
Yeah, I think Stephen Hawking was an INTJ, and that's I think at the same time, when I was kind of a fan of Stephen Hawking, he's like, I don't know if you know him. He's like a scientist from UK.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, on the wheelchair. And I was really big, huge fan of him when I was in the university. And at that time, I think I also first time took the test. And I was like, yeah, I'm like Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, something I need to look into. I know a lot of people that are mistyped because of like MBTI. They kind of just go on vague stereotypes rather than kind of looking at it and kind of seeing how they are fundamentally as a person, how they communicate and how they interact. But I haven't looked too much into Stephen Hawking, but I definitely heard like, some of his theories, and but it's hard to really tell how he communicates because he used that device and everything to talk. So it's kind of hard.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, I want to touch a little bit on the AvPD, the avoidant personality disorder. What are some symptoms that you've shown? And
That's a great question. Um, I think the earliest I can remember is pretty much like the early teenage years. I think there's a huge change in one's psychology, and you start to notice that life isn't just like fun and games, and you kind of you're figuring out who your friends are and how do you talk to other people. But like the best way I could summarize it is probably like I'm getting a sensation. I don't want to be like part of most of the social life or the social games, if you will, because they just seem really like kind of superficial to me, and I don't respect them. I see like a lot of like friends not being friends anymore, or people betray each other, and even then among older people like adults. And you just kind of think to yourself, well, maybe I just want to play video games. And that's kind of what I did. And nowadays I actually don't play video games anymore. I don't find enjoyment in that, but I did as a teenager. And the thing is, then you play video games, and there is a community of gamers, right? And they are friends among each other. But me, I didn't really feel like making friends with them, or I didn't really know how to make friends with them. To be exact, it's more like deep down I would like to make friends with them, but there's just it's like you're on a different frequency, or you just don't have anything interesting to say, or it just feels like there is a mysterious language that people speak in the social life that you just don't pick up on. And yeah, then you get this feeling you simply just don't belong, and you're kind of alone. So what you do then is you gravitate towards people who are sort of not necessarily just like you are, but to people who are somewhat outsiders as well, you can say. And then yeah, I had like like 3 friends as a teenager, and one of them is still my friend to this day. And like I'm really thankful for that, because otherwise I would probably have like 0 friends.
how
So
old
I
are
just
you, if I may ask? I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm 31.
31. Okay. So growing up, did you ever like have this intense feeling of like embarrassment? Like you might look foolish in front of people, or people reject you, so you never really try to interact with people?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the high school kind of scene does that to you pretty well. And yeah, at the same time, that's when I decided I want to be an exchange student in the United States. So, and the reason for that was I thought, or I was wondering, is it really me that's the way I am? Is it because of me, or is it because the culture here? Maybe if I try a different culture, maybe see how things are over there. That was the kind of thinking.
Yeah,
So yeah, I kind of pushed myself to do that. But of course, like even at the time, I probably already knew that it is me. It is not just the culture. It is something in me that is making me who I am.
yeah. So yeah, the United States is probably the wrong culture to go to if you're an INTJ or you have an AVPD. How was the culture in the US compared to Germany?
Yeah, so I actually didn't grow up in Germany. I grew up in a like a small Eastern European country.
Okay.
But it's quite similar between Germany and Eastern Europe in some ways. In some ways it's not. And US is like a world of difference to Europe. So, well, it's the usual suspect, right? It's the very like overly extroverted, almost fake friendliness that you get at the first sight, whereas in Germany you get kind of like a cold, reserved treatment.
Really?
Yeah, but nevertheless, I think in the US it helps, even if it's fake friendship, it helps you to at least make the first connection. You know what I mean? Like at least you get a chance to talk to somebody and maybe you hit it off. But like in Germany, it's really hard, or it's pretty hard to make friends just by like some small talk or whatever. So you got to have like a good reason to talk to someone. So at least you got to have something in common, like a sport, let's say. And if you are with the people who play the same sport, then you can maybe be friends with them. But even that doesn't really guarantee anything.
Okay. So what was your experiences like in the US? Was it kind of like overwhelming? Was it like a big culture shock? Like imagine I'm in Houston. I lived in near Dallas for a while, and
Mhm.
Houston, I'm sure there's a lot of Mexican culture down there, and I'm sure it's quite different and the weather is quite different.
Yeah, I mean, it was at first, of course, there's a language barrier, and there's like a little bit of culture barrier. But when you're 17, it doesn't really matter, I think, because you're all teenagers are kind of the same everywhere. And so like the thing is, at the time, I was really kind of still like looking for my identity at a time. So I was really kind of more open to anything. And to answer your question, well, like there was different people at different times. So there were
Mhm.
people who were um I want to say like generally I had good experiences. Like I don't want to like trash the US too much, because I think there's good people there, and I met mostly good people there. It's really it's been difficult for me because of being introvert. But I was at the time I was really pushing myself to kind of talk to people and make friends, at least in the beginning. After a while, I kind of stopped doing that. It's been a while. I haven't thought about it for a while.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. What about your parents? Were they pretty supportive? Were they kind of like you need to go out and be, I guess, quote unquote, normal, or any like traumatic issues there? Or where do you think this
Yeah,
anything came from?
like when your parents realize that you don't want to go out much, you don't want to make any friends, and you're saying things like, well, you're kind of like nihilistic and negative about things, then your parents will pick up on that. And then of course they want you to like, well, you should do something, right? Or you should pick up a hobby or something, or they even try to set you up with like some relative to like to do something together. But the thing is, like, I think my family didn't have that many friends to begin with.
Hmm.
And as you mentioned in the prep, I think the upbringing has a lot to do with who you become, whether you become introvert or extrovert. Or I mean, who knows, right? Like this is really the like I will never know who would I be if I grew up in a different family. It's like I will never know the answer to that.
Yeah. Okay. So what about like relationships as an adult? Has it still kind of affected you? Like, are you able to get like a girlfriend or whatever your preference is? I know you said you had a high school friend that you still talk to. Or people at work, do you have trouble communicating with them?
Yeah. So at work, I have no problem talking to people because there's always the work to talk about. But I don't like to do the small talk.
Yeah.
I just don't like it. It's not that I can't do it. Like I'm able to do it, or at least with people who I kind of like. And that isn't even anything too strange. I think most people have this feeling. But I have a feeling some people will do the small talk just because of cultural pressure. and they're not able to just say, they're not really able to stand up to what they really want, and they're controlled by the culture too much. But anyway, that's kind of a tangent.
Oh no, I don't think so at all.
Yeah, I mean, every topic we touch upon, we could like talk about for 2 hours, I have a feeling.
For sure.
So like relationships are difficult for everyone, I think. And people who, or I've always admired like people who can just kind of become friends out of nothing and then just kind of take everything so easily and smoothly in life. But that's really, and a lot of people say that, but I don't think that's really true because everybody has issues in relationships and struggles. But to kind of answer your question, I mean, in my 20s, I was really struggling to find like a long-term girlfriend because, wow, it's just just the idea of like incorporating someone in your life is really strange and really intrusive at some point. It's like you don't want to be alone, but you can't just handle so much presence of another person. And so like when I'm with other people and suddenly I'm like, I usually get like sensory overload from getting too much information while hanging out with a group of people. But with one person it's a lot easier. But still over time there is like, and I cannot really explain it without the other party getting insulted, right? So it's like, yeah, I like you, but I can't stand you. So it takes some like dedication and restraint, and it's about, everything is a compromise, really. So when I finally met someone when I was like 28, and we're still together.
Oh, nice.
But of course, it's never easy. It's never easy.
Yeah, I think a big like INTJ qualm is like, I want to be in a relationship just with a handful of people. I don't need, to have a Rolodex full of people to call, throw a big party. But it's kind of the thing, like if I get into a relationship, that's going to keep me from reaching my own goals. That's going to take time away from doing the stuff that I want to do. That's kind of like, Matt, I don't know if you're familiar with Abraham Maslow, who's like an American psychologist, and he has like the hierarchy of needs, but having like an intimate relationship and friends is like a big part of development and individualization and self-actualization, as he called it.
Definitely, I'd like to touch up on that because I used to have, or we used to have a group of friends when we were in you would say high school, like 12 to 15 years of age. We were like a really tight group of friends. And after that, you go to like the secondary school or whatever, and you kind of start going your own way, and our group just fell apart. And that was the first time. So I was 15 at the time. So at that time, I felt this really void of suddenly not having these friends who I kind of took for granted, that you always just get your friends because you just get somewhere and there's a group of people and there will be your friends. But it doesn't work like that in like university and the job. So yeah, that's a really rude awakening for for a young person at that age.
Yeah, I think just like high school and school in general, when you're that age, like you said, like it wasn't too big of a difference for you going to the US because teenagers are teenagers. I think with like when you're in school, you just kind of like, you don't know who you are and you're trying to find other people and you're trying to find yourself, and you see other people being social. So that's kind of what you do. And it's easier to make friends, but as an adult, it's much harder. What kind of hobbies do you have outside of engineering? It's not your hobby, your occupation.
I like to do sports. I like to play like a ball hockey. I do it, like I mentioned earlier, to kind of infiltrate the German society a little bit and to make some connections and get some exercise. And I like to play team sports for some reason, which might not be so typical for INTJ. I like to do I used to like learning languages. So I mean, I can speak 3 languages, but that's mostly kind of also out of practicality. Um, Recently, I like to learn. I like to solve the Rubik's cube.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really kind of like fun thing to do, and it's like a tactile thing, and you also it's like you use your brain and your fingers at the same time. So you
Can you
could
solve
classify
it?
it. Yeah, I can totally. And then
Hmm.
you try to solve it as fast as possible, and then you can go to competitions. And yeah, and I guess you could classify this as one of those maybe like a SE thing, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's about what I was going to point up. Like SE is something that's inferior for us, so it kind of has some overlapping traits of the avoidant personality disorder. It's kind of like SE inferior. You're really self-conscious about giving people a bad time, a bad experience, looking bad, smelling bad, sounding bad, and we're kind of clumsy and not very agile until we exercise it. We kind of, at least I did, and a lot of other unhealthy INTJs did. They believe like they should be good at one thing, or they should be really good at something without really any practice. Like I always thought I should have been like the Michael Jordan of something without even trying, but even, he had to sit there and practice and practice and practice. So I think it is
Hmm.
definitely good to go and find a sport or an activity or art or making
I
videos.
really, I guess I could say I like grind for some reason. I like to grind things. Like I've been in the same job for like 6, 7 years. I can play the Rubik's Cube every day for like 3 years. And with the sports, it's the same. It's like you go to practice 3 times a week. It's like you repeat,
Hmm.
and you feel like maybe you're just telling it to yourself, or maybe it's also true that you're kind of building up towards something over long term. Then yeah, it's like a bigger, and you get like a bigger reward for it than if you just do it once in a while.
Yeah, it's like a delayed gratification sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting that you like team sports, because INTJs, they typically like individual sports. Like I do judo, for instance. If I lose, it's all
Uh-huh.
on me.
Yeah, and like I would say to that, I like team sports, but I like to be the goalkeeper because the goalkeeper is like a
Mm,
very individual position, and it's
yeah.
all about your performance and how you can contribute. You contribute to the team, and I like when my team wins. And I like that my performance isn't dependent on other people all that much.
Yeah, and like half the time you're standing there by yourself while both of the teams are on the other side of the field, right?
Yeah, I mean, I used to play the attack as well, and that's also the same thing. You can be like a forward player, and you can be very like individual as well. But that's pretty bad if you're like if you don't pass to other people, you just try to score yourself and you try to show off by yourself. But I feel that tendency there as well. Like I want to be the guy who scores the goal.
So you're like the goalie. So like one of the judo instructor, he's an ISTP. He's actually an engineer too. He works at Raytheon, I guess, building weapons. He was sitting there talking about goalkeeping in soccer or football. Like you'll see him like dive one side or to the other because you don't know exactly which way the ball is going to go. Like that's why you see like a goalie go that way and a ball goes this way into the net. Is that similar with hockey? Is that like something you can anticipate with your NI? Like you can know where the ball or the puck or whatever device is
I
used
think
in
I think in hockey it's mostly reflexes. So you gotta have. But for some reason, I've always had sort of good reflexes, even as a kid. I think that's also thanks to my father because he dedicated a lot of time to playing like ball games with me. So like in a hockey, you just kind of sit there and you like hope you catch the ball with a reflex. Whereas in
Mhm.
soccer, you have to like more position yourself and you have to be more aware of the surroundings because you cannot just catch everything with a reflex. If you're standing like on the wrong side of the goal is just too big, you're not gonna catch it.
Mm.
But yeah, like you gotta have a feeling for what's happening in the game, and you have to look what's happening. But I wouldn't. I'm not sure if I would say that you can like anticipate too far in the future because the game changes so fast.
Yeah. You ever like big thing with NI is kind of like you daydream and you're in your own head a lot and you kind of escape reality. Do you ever like see you like sitting there at the goal post and You're daydreaming and the puck or the ball goes right by your head and goes into the goal and the other team scores. Does that ever happen to you? Or
Nah, that would be too embarrassing. I mean,
yeah.
when you mentioned daydreaming, like sure I do that a lot, or like maybe just thinking to myself a lot, or even talking to myself a lot. I talk to myself all the time when I'm alone,
Mm-hmm.
or at least having like an internal like a monologue. Uh, but during the game, I try to. The thing about the game is it totally like pushes all this overthinking out of your mind, because suddenly it's only you, your body, and the ball or the puck, and all this unnecessary stress or whatever you have going on in your head, you can just kind of forget about it for a while. And that's why I like it so much.
Yeah, I think that's what I see in judo. It just kind of makes me forget about all my problems, all my fantasy I built inside of here. And it just kind of gets me into the present moment, which SC is all about.
Yeah, like SE is like the fourth weakest thing in INTJ, right? So, but it's still like the positive, it's not the shadow function. So it's kind of like there, but you have to call.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
the thing about I like to add something to this, because being in a present moment, and when you said being a gateway, it really kind of spurs a thought, because I remember sometimes you are like in this kind of moment, this zone where you're in a moment, and you realize, well, life could be so great and so simple if you could just live in a moment all the time.
mhm.
And then you realize you can't. You have to go back to the prison of your own mind. It's like you get a teaser, like a trailer of what the movie could be if you just could push yourself to be there. And when you're in this like the present moment kind of state of mind, then it's also when you feel more connected with other people, and where the other people seem to more connect with you, and everything seems just more altogether more connected, and you really like want to stay in that state of mind. It
Yeah,
happens, I don't mean, like, let's say you go, to me it happened when I went out drinking, and then it's like you get maybe drunk a little, but it's not only the alcohol, it's just kind of the atmosphere altogether, and you suddenly you feel like, wow, this why don't I live like this like every second of my life? Why do I have to live in my head most of the time?
yeah, I think that's a big part of like the SC inferior. Like our dual side are complete opposites to ESFP. They're the usually the loudest person in a room. They're the ones that's always living in the moment and never in their head. They never anticipate the future, and they're the type that doesn't look before they leap, and they fall down the pit. So that's kind of like what we aspire to be in a very in a kind of intrinsic way, and they kind of want to be more like us, more analytical and more forward-thinking and looking, for foresight. So that's definitely a way, like doing sports and stuff like that can get you out of your head. And I imagine being an engineer, you're quite by yourself a lot of the time, right?
Yeah, like I can work in an office with other people, or I can also work from home, which I actually prefer to work from home. And even if I'm at the office, I'm still kind of just working on my own thing. And yeah, like you go have a coffee with someone, but it's not like, especially in Germany, that's
Mm-hmm.
like that's another. It's like the introversion square, sort of.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more. Did you ever feel like socially inept, like you're not good enough to belong in society, or you're not good enough for a relationship? Has that ever like hung over your head?
Yeah, of course, all the time. I mean, when you're young and you see other people do things and you're not doing them, then you're automatically thinking, well, what's wrong with me? And then you try to do those things and you fail, and that even strengthens your conviction that there's definitely something wrong with you. And then you kind of, and but time kind of goes on, and you kind of realize that the people who were cool back then are no longer so cool anymore, and that we're all just kind of same. We just happen to have different personalities, and you have to accept who you are, and you have to accept your weaknesses also, to yeah, to make other people accept you and make other people respect you. And of course, like like for me, I went to university and I thought, well, if I get a job, then maybe I will feel more respected, and it does work that way. Like you get a job, suddenly you make your own money, you make your own living, and suddenly you feel like you belong to the society somewhat more,
Hmm.
or at least you feel like you justified your existence in society. You're no longer like a leech to anyone, and it helps to an extent, but you still are who you are, and you're still struggling to with like every daily interaction. Um, I mean, I mean, where do I start? Like, I could go through so many experiences in my life where, like, I would want to, like, I wanted to go to an event with a
Hmm.
friend who's also kind of like me. He's my best friend, and we pretty much every time just theorize in our minds what would it be like if we actually went to this, it's like a disco or something. And then one day we finally like muster up the courage to go there. And when we make it to the front door, and then we're like, but do we really want to go there? You know, like,
Yeah.
and then we just end up not entering that place. And it's just like it really kind of underscores how, like, how well, I don't want to say pathetic. I think because I own up to it, like I'm okay with it. But it's just kind of like this would not happen to regular people. Like regular people, they don't just go to an event and then turn back on the front door just because they don't really want to go.
Yeah, I find myself doing it sometimes too. Like I went out to a bar this weekend and kind of tried to socialize. I went into this it's like this little art sort of bar. It's a pretty cool. I actually like the environment, and it's a lot quieter, and they're not blaring music top, all the way up, and they're just people like painting there. I didn't paint because I'm not very artistic, but they have like a patio where you can use a cannabis, and they actually had mead, which I love mead, and I found a mead drink that I liked there, and it was like really relaxed. And I decided to go to another bar that had like older people there, like closer to my age. Actually, they're older than me, and it was just so loud and stuff, and I just had to leave. It's kind of hard to find like a social event that kind of fits us, I guess.
Yeah, like I don't see social event ever really fitting because it's not like it's not real. You know, there's nothing real about, because you're not going to show your real face to those people.
Hmm. I think
And
that's just
I never respected the like the fakeness of it.
yeah.
But I understand like people want to go out and socialize and do those things, and I want to do those things too in a sense. But I at least want to do it with like a small group of people.
Yeah, like on your own terms. I think that's just a lot of people. They just kind of go and they just get caught up in the moment, and they just kind of forget about their problems. Like one of the most arbitrary questions that someone can ask you is like, "Hi, how are you doing?" Because you have to answer like, "Good, how are you?" Because if you answer like, "Oh, I'm having a bad day," or "I'm going through a bad period of my life," then it's not like a socially acceptable answer.
Yeah, like the good thing about Germany is you don't really get these questions a lot. Nobody's in
No.
your face all the time.
Yeah, here it's always all day at work. Hi, how are you doing? I work with 150 people, and you have to say hi, how are you doing to each of them, and it's kind of like,
Yeah, it doesn't even mean anything anymore.
yeah, it's like I don't know, it's just like an entry point, I guess, for people.
I think at some point in the US, I started like giving like honest answers just to like shock people.
Yeah, yeah, you tell people the truth, or like you're at a restaurant and they're the waiter, the waitress, the server's like, "Hi, how's your meal?" Like, "Well, this is dry," and stuff like that, and they're like, look at you weird, like, well, you asked, why do you want to ask questions you don't want to hear the answer to?
Yeah, I would like to do these like kind of shocking things to people, and also kind of like nitpick their like the reasons why they're asking it, or like nitpick their own sentences and their logic, and just kind of being like a like a pet peeve. And it's not a great personality trait, but I would because it's at least you're kind of disrupting the everyday boring status quo kind of everyday thing, and it's like a way that you kind of stand out of your introversion because you never say anything. Because I used to be the guy who likes to make these like like asinine jokes when you least expect it.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it in a way
Yeah, that's
because I
us, the
like,
inferior coming out.
okay.
A lot of people appreciate it, and a lot of people don't. A lot of it's just like this weird, dark, random humor, and some people just crack up laughing because they don't expect it out of you, and some people are like, "What did you say?"
Yeah, it's just like my way of interacting with society.
Yeah. Well, we're running a little bit low on time here. I want to get into the functions a little bit. So we talked a little bit about NI, so we won't talk about that much, like your daydream, your inner world. And you said that TE was especially helpful for you with, I imagine, being, going engineering. I was going to go into civil engineering myself. I changed my major so many times, but I was never very good at math. It never came very natural to me. Again, it was like, something you have to practice at and really learn to do. And I just kind of like, well, I'm not good at it because I could just do everything else in school, like no problem. How's your TE, and I imagine being an engineer developed that? How else have you developed it? I imagine the Rubik's Cube too.
I mean, the exterior thinking,
Yeah, extroverted
TE,
thinking.
extroverted thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So extroverted thinking is what I've read means you take apart everything logically without emotion, right? So that's pretty much how I've ever succeeded in anything in my life,
Mm-hmm.
including things like relationships, because you you really have to just kind of calculate, is this going to work or not? And you have to ask yourself, is this going to work or not? And you ask yourself that not by, or at least I don't ask myself that by some emotion. I have to look at it rationally, otherwise I'm just stuck in emotional soup that I don't understand, and I feel lost in it. So extroverted thinking to me means basically I mean, I've read about like these like children's in your, like you have like your inner children, and this inner children I would say is the one that kind of, it's like the manager that is like directing your life and deciding the things for you. So I would say those are the things that my extroverted thinking is deciding. uh yeah, what am I saying? Well, basically, like, being an engineer, being, going through life, it's all just a series of decisions to me. And I think I'm better off using logic and reason and analysis to making every single one of those decisions than mixing emotions with it.
Okay, I should have probably explained it a little bit more, like John Beebe's theory. I don't know if you're familiar with Jungian archetypes. Archetypes are just like these characters that reoccurred through stories and history and fables and all that stuff. And ours is TE, the extroverted thinking, father, mother. The parent function is kind of like what we're responsible with. And the next one is introverted feeling, kind of how we feel internally, or moral compass, like how we distinguish right from wrong and how we kind of direct our path. It's the child function. We could be very childish with the way we feel. We could be like, well, I don't feel like doing that, so I'm not going to do this, or I disagree with this person because I have a different viewpoint. How's that affected you?
So the internal feeling, you mean?
Yeah, introverted feeling, like just
Introvert.
your
Yeah,
inner
yeah, yeah, yeah,
emotions.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So to have some, like, an inner moral conviction, I think that it definitely manifested in my life. Usually, I would usually like incorporate it with like a good reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
And an example of that would be like, well, it's like, well, yeah, like why are we paying taxes where we could be better off keeping the money to ourselves or something like that?
Yeah.
Because I can also say, well, if I kept it to myself, well, I could take care of myself better, and everyone could take care of themselves better. But that doesn't necessarily apply to the entire population. So
Exactly.
I'm not saying that is true. I'm just saying like that's something I would argue maybe to my father when I first learned about what taxes are and why people pay them. and I would feel like this strong internal moral conviction that it's my money that I earned, and it's no one else's to take.
Yeah.
And I think that people, even in adulthood, still carry this conviction, obviously. But life is a lot more nuanced than that. Yeah, but this internal moral conviction, it's just like, you know, or when I would debate someone who's like a religious person, they would tell me, well, you need religion to know right from wrong, and I'm like, well, I don't really feel that way. I mean, I know what's right and wrong deep inside me, and I think
Mhm.
everyone does.
Yeah, I think that's where organized religion kind of robs people. It's kind of like, let me think about how you feel and how you believe and how you worship and your own personal morals. Let me do that for you. When it's like an internal spiritual journey. You got to discover it yourself.
I guess some personality types really maybe lack this attribute, and then they're more likely to tend to organize religion.
Yeah, I'll definitely touch on that as we get into shadow function. That's kind of where it manifests, I think. But we'll go talk a little about the SE. We talked a little about that. I guess we'll touch up on it again. So I think this is like a big cause of the avoidant personality tendencies, just your very fear of public shame, basically. And it sounds like you overcome that through sports and kind of competing with a Rubik's Cube. Have you ever been to any competitions with that or?
Yeah, I've been just shortly before COVID. Then since then everything was shut down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely felt a little nervous the first time,
Yeah, I bet.
and generally feeling ashamed. I mean, I guess I can attest to it to an extent. At least in my younger years, I don't know. I guess when you're young, and the people around you judge you a lot by everything you do, and
Mhm.
extremely so. And every the way you walk, the clothes you wear, and what does it mean, and like, do you have the nice clothes or you have the ugly clothes or whatever. And I remember being really upset about that when I was like a teenager. But it kind of fizzles away over time, or at least these really like silly things.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that they hit the nail on the head there. So I want to go a little bit in the shadow functions. We're getting pretty low on time. The
Hmm.
first one is any opposing personality nemesis. It's extroverted intuition. It kind of opposes our NI, the introverted intuition. In the shadow, how it manifests, like we're paranoid about other people's intentions. We often think about how people are going to betray us, negative future outcomes. Kind of like we worry about other people's future, worry about, like other possibilities. How's that affected you?
Yeah, so I expect to get scammed by everyone. Like, I don't expect anything good from anyone, honestly. Like, and it's just, I don't see how other people don't feel that way.
Yeah.
And I'm not being like cynical or too overly like dramatic or anything. It's just a fact. Like, and especially when you use the internet, like, like I don't know if you know the show Mr. Robot. It's
Mm-mm.
it's been it's been like, it's like a guy who's like a hacker, and well, it doesn't really matter what he does, but he's pretty much like living on the fringe of society because of how, but to me, in my opinion, he's just aware of how things are, and he thinks people are crazy because they're just using social media, and then they're sharing everything online and not thinking
Yeah.
twice about it. I feel like I veered off a little bit. I mean, the question was a little different. Uh,
Yeah, it's like, have you ever been like paranoid about something like stabbing you in the back, so you just shut them out of your life? You fear like you want to do something, but you think that that's just going to fall apart, or do you ever like worry about like a family member? It's that something like I'll sit there and lay in bed like all the bad things that could happen to my son, and just sit there and like almost traumatizes me. You ever have like moments like that?
I used to I used to worry about my parents a lot, like especially whenever we're fighting, maybe, or I used to worry about my mother, or I would. But honestly, I'm pretty self-centered person, so I usually just worry about myself and how other people that I want to react certain way will react, or like, am I going to fit in here and there? And then probably just abandoning, like, just like I mentioned, I think the story with going to an event and then just turning and not going there,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty much because like I want to do things that I'm pretty sure I will succeed at. I don't want to risk failure, basically. And I'm talking mainly about like, well, everything, but also like social life.
Okay. The next one is called Cynics, Introverted Thinking, where you said like you kind of resonate with INTPs, and this is what they lead with. The Cynics is like very critical of like your own thoughts. You may think that you're really stupid or not smart enough, or you could even kind of trick you in thinking like you're smarter than everybody else. You're like absolutely right about something and you're so convinced about it, but it turns out you're wrong and you're just kind of being super arrogant about something. Has that ever happened to you?
I mean, I try to avoid the latter one you just described because that's like really lame and embarrassing, and I don't want to appear that way. But
Mm-hmm.
but saying that, I've definitely been wrong about things, and I don't think I'm like when I'm wrong about something, I try not to be arrogant about it. But I think I have in the past. But I mean, yeah, like really having cynical thoughts is probably the worst part of me. Like I'm probably overly cynical sometimes, like unnecessarily cynical sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, the next ones are the interesting ones that kind of make us less religious than most types and less social than most types. There's FE Trickster. FE Trickster is extroverted feeling, and it's something that we kind of almost lack. We're almost devoid of. Like we don't really pick up on other people's feelings. We don't really consider other people's feelings. Like you said that you think real rationally and you think of you use your head rather than your heart to lead. Kind of like the hi, how you
Yeah.
doing sort of thing. Like this is how people do to try to like make each other feel good. How's that like bit you in the ass in life?
So yeah, like something like this is kind of a learned skill of mine. I think I can pretty much get through life without hurting people's feelings, but it wasn't always that way.
Mm-hmm.
So like another story, it's like during a ball game, I somehow kicked a girl with a ball in the face, and she was crying, and I said like completely devoid of any emotion, like that couldn't have hurt. That wasn't
Yeah.
because like in my mind that wasn't a hard ball at all. Like, and I'm just trying to convey that message and thinking that will somehow soothe her. You know, it's like don't cry. It wasn't a hard shot. So I vividly remember this story. So I think this kind of I don't know. I think this kind of corresponds to this trait.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how it does. Like if somebody comes to us and they're crying, we're like one of the worst types to come to. If somebody has like an emotional problem, we'll try to rationalize their emotion instead of like what they're really looking for is like someone just to empathize with them and let them express their emotion and kind of get that out of the system. We're more solution oriented where we're like, well, let's fix the solution to the problem so you're not feeling this way. That's kind of the way we look at it. We come off very cold and very blunt and very uncaring. And people just really want to express themselves and have somebody kind of like, is this feeling valid?
It also took me a while to realize people don't always look for my solution, right? They
Yeah.
actually just want to express their emotion and they want me to listen. But I'm already like, well, yeah, you got to do this and that to solve this problem, then you wouldn't be crying.
Yeah, exactly. And the next one's SI demon, the introvert sensing. This is like something that we personally hate, that we don't like, and we kind of uh, disregard. Really, it could be like self help, like INTJs often, like I didn't. Like I didn't have a sleeping pattern for the first 30 years of my life. I would just nap 2 or 3 hours here and there. We skip meals or we overeat. We know that overeating is bad for us. Like that's my problem, and we'll just gorge or we'll abuse alcohol. It could also be like SI is one of the most religious functions. It's kind of like the tradition, the values, and things like that. And we often hate, like, I don't know if you know who Christopher Hitchens is. He's an INTJ and he hated religion, hated Christianity.
Yeah.
And that was due to SI demon. And we were talking a little bit about
Hmm.
this earlier, and this is like the anti-religion function almost. And we're like the least religious of the types, but there's definitely some religious INTJs. And can you elaborate more on this a little bit?
So from what you've said, I can really resonate with the anti-religious kind of feeling, because it just like the I always thought like why would you I mean, you know what I'm trying to say. Like it's almost like, to me, it's like you have been given the human brain that is capable of so many things, and you choose to do this with it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I'm not really sure if this is just the SI thing. I think it's, for me, it's kind of just a general conclusion of just looking at life rationally and analytically. And I always used to. I mean, I actually respect religious people nowadays a lot more, and I think you're free to believe what you want, because I also don't have answers to everything, and that's, you know, that's okay. But I still kind of despise organized religion. And I used to tell, like, I used to go like on online forums and debate Christians and things like that when I was like a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always tell them, like, if God exists and he sees you believing in organized religion, he's probably disappointed in you, because you were given a tool to think, and not to just blindly follow things.
Yeah. I'm gonna
But
wrap this.
I mean, I should really learn more about these functions, because it, the, some of the things, it just kind of reminded me of, well, not reminded me, it kind of um, cemented some opinions of mine, since we started talking about how why I think certain things. But anyway, it's out of time.
Well, I got a few more questions I'd like to ask, but yeah, that's like I didn't know clue who I was just because there's just not very many of us, and it's like you can't go up to your uncle who's also an INTJ or very likely and kind of get advice, you know. So it's just like learning these functions and learning the psychology has really like helped me like realize who I am, and like my strengths are not actually weaknesses, even though other people tell me that they are. And you can definitely do things and see things the way that other people can't. But I have another appointment coming up, so I really hate to rush it. But what is your favorite type and your least favorite type, and why?
So I think I have two favorite types. I like the INTPs. I like how people who are level-headed and rational and able to think abstractly about things.
Mm-hmm.
And I also like, I guess, ENTJ, because that's probably something I was trying to become at some point, to be more extroverted with INTJ, I guess.
Yeah.
And I like that type because it's like the guy who's the boss, right? He's the leader, he's the executive, he's the guy. Like, you just had the guy, I forgot his name, on your podcast. He's like running companies and doing things, and it's like you're showing to your family or to the world, whoever, that you can do things.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a big thing, especially when you're young.
Okay. What about your least favorite type?
um Hard to say. I mean, I wouldn't say I dislike someone based on their type. It's more like it's probably going to be like someone who's extroverted and kind of based on feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be, not that I don't dislike this person only because of that, but this person will probably have the most difficulty dealing with me. Like, I expect them to be confused and kind of upset about my lack of like action, or lack of signaling, and or anything like that. So I probably have a hard time getting along with someone like that.
Yeah. You just kind of see the world in a different lens. All right, I know you're not too well versed in typology, which is fine. What would you like to know about other types?
So I'm most curious about how extroverted people can absorb the huge amount of information that's being thrown at them when they're like talking to three different people at the same time, and they can still so easily balance everything in their mind and say the right thing to the right person and keep their grace while they're at it. Because I just get like a sensory overload after talking 30 minutes to
Yeah,
someone in a bar.
yeah, it's just like they're just like the complete opposite of introverts. They need a crowd to recharge and like groups, and that's how they charge and feel better. Like we need to back away and be alone or just like one person and just relax. And that's kind of how we recharge. And that's a really big question, kind of depending on what function they lead with and things like that. What would you like other types to know about you as an INTJ or just as a person?
Hmm. I don't know. I don't honestly wish to force anyone to learn about people like me, but I mean we're here, and I think there's a place for everyone, you know.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're about out of time. Do you have any questions? Anything you want to tell the people before you go? Any last thoughts?
Hmm. Not really. It's my first time on YouTube.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's kind of an overwhelming thing for some people, but I think you did a good job, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, especially like when we have the AvPD traits. It can be very hard to express yourself.
I'd like to just point out I like firstly I like the way that you do the podcast and you show people to. I mean you present people that are just kind of like no name nobodies like me, because that's not usually what you go watch on YouTube. It's usually just like those clickbaity kind of high view count corporate kind of shill thing.
Hmm.
But this is actually the way the internet was meant to be used, just kind of people peer to peer, but not on a social media yelling at each other, but just kind of connecting the world in some like a humane way and actually bringing something to can maybe inspire others.
Yeah, it's kind of like the point. I just want people to understand one another, like INTJs. I think we're really misunderstood, and I think we don't really understand people all that well. So I just kind of want to connect the dots and try to get people to understand each other a little bit better, so we can kind of live in a more harmony. Or,
Yeah, I mean, I hope I didn't turn this into like a therapy for myself, but it was certainly therapeutic for me a little bit.
oh no, you did a great job. I really appreciate it. With that
All
being
right.
said, though, if you like this content, please like, share, subscribe, get it out there to other people so we can, spread the message of, understanding and so we get to know each other a little bit better. I really appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate Jan coming on. Thank you for going me on the clickbait. Have a great day.